The Canadian Men's Health Foundation has released a new study to coincide with Men's Health Month, which is June. Among other things, it shows more men are struggling with high levels of stress and depression. However, there is work underway to help deal with that. Audrey Collis is a psychologist based here in Nova Scotia, and he joins us tonight to talk about a new initiative launched by the foundation. It's called Never Alone, a national campaign focused on helping men talk about mental health. Well, thank you for coming in tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the findings of this study now. More men are struggling with stress and depression. What are the numbers telling you?
Yeah, so, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, these are numbers that are increased over last year. So we have about 64% of men reporting moderate to high levels of stress, 23% reporting moderate to severe levels of depression. And that's about a 4% increase from last year, so an increase year to year. The other piece I think that's really important is that we're also seeing that 1 in 2 men report feeling more socially isolated. And that's a really big issue because I think it concerns not only the men, but we don't live in a vacuum. So the families, the loved ones, and the communities that they're a part of as well.
Everyone is just feeling more isolated now.
Yeah, and I think a big piece of that, I think, is there's a lot of these challenges, these broader challenges that not only Nova Scotian men, Canadian men, but again, like families and communities in general face around things like political instability, economic insecurity, their jobs, climate change that are hard for someone to deal with by themselves. Add to that the daily challenges that people tend to face as well, like their jobs, their health, relationships. That's a lot for someone to deal with alone. And especially for men that are men have a tendency of, not sharing the things that might be going on with them as much.
Sure.
And add to that, when they're struggling, we're more likely to reach for solutions that might give us short-term relief, but actually might keep us feeling more socially isolated and depressed and stressed in the long term.
And younger men, aged 19 to 29, at a higher risk. So why younger men?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because a lot of younger men are in this period of transitions. So particularly transitioning from high school, transitioning from college, and part of that involves rediscovering themselves and trying to build and find new relationships, new friendships, new communities. That takes time, and that's hard to do. And the other piece to kind of consider as well is that cost of living has gone up. And so we have less now disposable income for younger men to spend on these social activities.
Right.
So if they don't have environments that are structured already, like work and things like that, where they can meet people and interact with people around them.
They're sitting at home.
They're sitting at home and it makes it harder. And that's another piece. We live in an age now where they're coming into to those transitions where, we've had the shift to virtual work, virtual school, that make it harder for young men, people in general, to meet new people. Social media can certainly help for things like that, but what we also know from the research is that it really depends on how we use it, and which is why it's really important that the work that the Men's Health Foundation is doing in terms of building and encouraging people to find safe and inclusive spaces here in the real world.
Why don't men reach out for help? Because it's not just mental health, right? I mean, you could walk around with bleeding from the eyes and not go to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
Why are we so reluctant to do that?
I think there's a lot of reasons. One of the main ones is I think that we've been exposed to really unhelpful myths about what it is to be a man. So be self-reliant, be unemotional. You're the protector, so you don't complain, right? And the side effect of that is that for men that are struggling, it leaves them feeling really stuck. It makes them less likely to open up, less likely to be honest about things that are going on in their lives.
Right.
And that's really concerning because we see that another number that's really important here is that in Canada, we have about 4,500 deaths by suicide per year. 75% of those are by men. And so, which is why it's really pointing out to us that it's important to normalize that it's okay to have feelings, it's okay to be struggling, and it's okay to be reaching out and leaning on other people for support.
How do we fix this? How do we get more of them to reach out?
I think that there's obviously no one-size-fits-all solution to this. For men that have people in their lives, we want to encourage them to shift away from this tendency or instinct to keep things to themselves and to try and go it alone, and instead shift more towards being more open and being more honest with what's going on with you, with your loved ones. Because we know from the research and from our clinical work that, you know, the more open we can be with the people around us, the stronger our relationships and the more we can rely on when things get tough. And for men that don't necessarily have those connections, don't feel that way, we want to let them know that they're not alone. And that a good place to start is to look into your local community. The sun's out right now, so it's, you know, things are happening. And so being able to find an activity that you like, whether it be a sport, hiking, woodworking, if you're religious, going to those communities and finding people that you might share similar interests with, and that could be a good place to start as well. Kind of going more broadly, menshealthfoundation.ca, along with other resources, are really helpful out there as a first step. Really helpful tools, self-assessments, access to virtual counseling, things like that. Every little bit kind of helps.
New season, new start.
New season, new start, yeah.
We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming in tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Nova Scotia psychologist Adri Callas joining us tonight to talk about a new survey on men's mental health. We'll be back with more of your news right after this break.